Welcome to Iron and Ceremony, Librarius Omnis, where we explore the depths of the planet.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Iron and Ceramite present Librarius Omnis. I'm John. As always, I'm joined by Shane.
Hi guys.
This is our series where we're reviewing the Black Library, and this is episode 3. We've been doing the Horus Heresy, and now we are coming up to Galaxy in Flames. I looked at the Lexicanon, which I liked, which I'd known about before. But then I still just skim read it anyway, because I was just picking up things that because I've wanted, when I was reading like Fulgrim, I was like, I'm going to have to go back to Galaxy or go back to the first 3 and read them again eventually to understand what's going on. So I'm glad that I have now, like even just like power read through and skip through quite a lot of it.
Well, there's so much context that you kind of miss. From the other ones, little details. Maybe that's where some of the criticism of the series comes in. Is you don't know how important it's going to be until you get like another piece of the puzzle in a later book, and that's when you're like, right, now I've got to go back and read that again, or I want to find that part again just to see, you know, what the context actually meant. I suppose that's also the joy of the series and why it is, you know, widely regarded as you know, one of the best-selling series.
Well, I mean, I really like it because you just, as you're going along and you're like, oh, they mentioned that ages ago.
Yeah.
So it's clever on their part because it makes you go back and reread stuff. But it is nice to like not have it all at once, and considering it is 20 different legions or 18 different legions out there doing their thing, you're never going to have. I mean, if they did it concurrent for everybody at the same time, you could only have a chapter per book based on anyone. So it's good. I like it that you have to jump back and forward, and gives you a bit of choice. And obviously, people leave bits out, don't they? Because they just go, I'm not interested in Dark Angel, so I'll just read everything that's to do with the Sons of Horus.
It's interesting though, because as I said, I think, you know, that we'll come to it when we get into it. But that first Dark Angels book I found, as I said before, was one of the hardest ones that I've come up against. But actually, by the time you get to the second Dark Angels book, it pays itself off. So I think it is worth the effort of trying to go through all of them. Like, as I said, there hasn't been one yet where I thought a couple of books on I shouldn't have read that, because it does start paying itself off.
Yeah, I can't see how it doesn't. I mean, you're 4 books ahead of me anyway, but so I would imagine there was a plan in place when they started this. At least a loose plan. Yeah. So I mean, so far, I've done 9 books, and it all seems to be pointing in the right direction. There isn't one where I've gone, well, I mean, the first half of Dark Angels was Descent of Angels was a bit jarring, just how different it was. But obviously it's layer building, isn't it? You get a lot of background to how their legion was formed and the thinking. So obviously I know that from spoilers and stuff, that going ahead, half the legion seems to turn traitor and half doesn't for a time. So it's sort of, you can see how it happened. Like reading that book, you can just see, even when they are in the forest before anything happens, you work it out.
The thing is, I mean, that like the Dark Angels are really important in that regard for the, as you said, for the lore in their part of the, you know, their part of the heresy. The fact that the Lion was, you know, potentially had his nose put out of joint when Horus was named War Master, because he could have been, like they said, he could have been one of those that should have maybe got the job. And like also, you know, the psychers that start coming out, and that's hinted at in that Descent of Angels. I can't remember his name now. Anyway, we're going off topic. We'll get to the Dark Angels.
We've got a couple of books left.
Yeah.
So, how have you rated the first 2 of the trilogy so far?
Well, the first 2. So, like, I really enjoy these opening 3 books to the Heresy. Anyway, I think they're all really good. I think what I'm astounded at, and we touched on it in one of the earlier book reviews, is that, even though they're written by 3 different authors, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like a really cohesive story, and I think each one of these books has, documents a different sort of stage. It is very much a trilogy, but a different stage of not only the chapter, like the Lunar Wolves, the Sons of Horus, and then finally their fall, but also the coming together and breakup of the Mournival. And it really is it's a great way to start the Heresy, because it does exist as a trilogy, and you could read it, each book independently, but it makes much more sense and becomes much more valuable when you read it as a trilogy.
You couldn't jump in on Galaxy in Flames and say, I'm just going to skip the first 2, because you wouldn't, although the story's there, you wouldn't get the meaning or sort of the emotion behind or motivation behind any of it. So they definitely need to go together. I know like people like to read the Heresy out of order, or in their own order, but you couldn't. I don't think you could do that with this. The first 3.
The first 3 they need to be that trilogy. But it is a great trilogy to open it up with, and I just like how, like as I said, the rise and fall of the Lunar Wolves and Horus is kind of, it's mirrored by the coming together and then breaking apart of the Mournival. And it's a nice rounded, you get the macro, what's happening in the universe, and then you get what's happening, at the Astartes level with Loken and what was once, so perfect for him, just being sort of torn apart.
By the sound of it, the Mournival, it really didn't last long, did it? From him getting promoted and things going wrong.
It
can only be in a couple of years.
Yeah, well, it didn't last long for him. But I don't know how much longer it was lasting beforehand, because obviously you had Sejanus, who was part of the Mournival, and Loken got lifted up to it. So you don't know how long it was. Like, was the Mournival something that Horus had? Once he got named War Master, was it before? I think it was before then, but I don't know how long they had it in the Lunar Wolves. And I was watching, back to sharing the hobby. There was a new Luton 09 video this morning, and I think in it he talked about the actual length of the Heresy. If you compare it to the rest of the 40k universe, which is thousands of years in scope. That the events of the Heresy happened over the course of a very short period of time. It was like 9 years. So it isn't, it's a blink of an eye compared to the rest of the setting, and how quickly this event happened, and what actually, the fact that it was a very small period of time, how much impact it actually had.
Yeah. It was a major turning point for everybody, wasn't it? So seeing as this is the shortest period in 40k, and they've managed to get 60, 70 books going.
I mean, I think it's in the mid-50s now, just for the core Heresy, and that's going to be, they're not finished yet, are they? So God knows when it'll finish.
We're going to be sat here forever. That's not a bad thing.
Could be a while. No, absolutely not.
Okay, so we've got a lot to cover. So shall we jump into part 1?
Yeah.
Long knives.
Indeed. Very apt. Very apt.
Yeah.
So I think what's important here is you've got, again, it's the combination between Horus falling, and he's now fallen. So he is now a servant to the ruinous powers. Even if he doesn't know he's a servant, he still thinks he's in control. He's justified why he needs to do this. He's started to bring together some of his brothers that are gonna be in on it. But while this is happening, at the same time, you've got this you've got Kirill Sinderman, as well as other people. So while Horus is falling further and further down in our estimations, there's this rising belief in the Emperor being a deity, and Keeler, Euphrates Keeler being a saint. And that picks off from the end of the last book as well. But it's interesting to see how the two contrast that as Horus is falling, the other one's like rising up, and it's just quite an interesting comparison between the two.
Yeah, and that sort of kicks off the start of this, because obviously when we left the last book, Keeler was in a coma after fighting off that demon that they accidentally summoned, or somebody purposely left the Book of Lorgar there for them to find. So then you have Titus Cassar from the Dice Array.
Yep.
Is obviously he's come into the fold with Keeler. He went to see Keeler right at the end, and he's come into the fold with Cinderman. And this one starts sort of shadowing how Horus Rising started, but this one is him leading the congregation for the new holy sort of order that they're starting.
Yeah.
And he says, I was there the day Horus turned his back on the Emperor, and it's just sort of come completely full circle back to where we started. But now, rather than it being Loken telling a joke about a Force Emperor being killed, and now we've got much more serious events where now the normal humans are saying, well, our War Master, who we've been following across the galaxy, has turned traitor against essentially the Emperor, who we believe is actually a god and not a man. And starts really whatever was going before, the swell of sort of religious acceptance and desperation, I guess, has really swept the lower levels of the vengeful spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, as I said, it's that as while that's happening, and they kind of recruit, as you said, it's was it Titus Cassar. He drags along with him his reluctant pal Jonah.
Yeah.
And they're he's always trying to convince Jonah that this is the right way, and Jonah's kind of caught between two camps, like his career progression and staying on the right side of everything, and not necessarily believing everything. And you just know, it's foreshadowing that the two of them are gonna, they're gonna play an important role further on in the book. You just don't know what that's going to look like yet. And in the meantime, you've got obviously at this point Horus has brought together the four, I suppose, core traitor legions in the World Eaters, who you saw at the end of the last book. So you knew Angron was bang on board, and obviously Fulgrim was also seen, with the I can't remember what Horus gave him, but they were obviously all together.
I think he must have gave him the Amaphane.
Oh, that was it. The Amaphane at the end. So we kind of knew that the World Eaters and the Emperor's Children are kind of going this way, and are going to help Horus. And then you've also got obviously Mortarion and the Death Guard, who are also joining now in crushing, or the pretense of crushing, a rebellion on the Eastman system, because that's how it's built, isn't it? This is now moving towards Horus, cleaning house effectively. It's this whole reason that they're there, is not only to gather the legions together, the traitor legions together, but also to make sure all of those that they don't think will join in their rebellion within the legions, that they're kind of cleared out. And so
just because, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just because you were a lunar wolf doesn't mean you're a son of Horus.
Exactly.
And if you're not sure, or if you're not on Horus's side, then he's definitely not wanting to keep you around. People clearly know it, because Loken talks to Cinderman right at the start of this, and he mentions that obviously Vivaris, the commander of the army from before, he said, well, he was definitely murdered by one of our shells. And Cinderman says, I think that I've forgotten his name already. It was such a big part. The Remembrancer from Carcassay.
Oh yeah.
And Cinderman says Carcassay was murdered.
Of course.
And Loki says, if it was a suicide, it's like, well, no. It turns out it wasn't so much. So they already know that things aren't quite right.
Yeah.
and they need to sort of start looking after each other.
That's it, and that's what because that's why they come under, like, they all come under the protection of Loken, don't they? And also Loken charges the Unheard. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The Unheard to look after them, but that comes.
That's later. Yeah,
that comes in a bit. I think one of the key bits that I think happens is when Horus questions his chief astropath, Ingmei Singh.
Yeah, that's right at the start as well. Chapter 1,
Yeah.
he's not happy with her,
and he's asking her about the saint, and he's like, what's this going on? Like, he's caught wind of it. What's happening here? And she obviously, like, uses her innate abilities to warn Cinderman, and that's where you get he recruits Titus Cassar after that, because obviously. Ingmei Singh is like, something's going on here. I've got to warn Cinderman. So Cinderman's aware that he has to, maybe make sure that Keeler is looked after and isn't in trouble. And that's where we find Magard back again.
Yeah. Yeah. And she would have been, obviously, Ingmei Singh would have been key to sending out all of Horus's messages. So she's probably got the best idea of what's going on. Plus, she's seen the demon from before, and clearly she's obviously a good guy.
Yeah.
So she gets that out, and and as you say, warns Cinderman, because he's speaking with Cassar somewhere else, and then isn't it a group of Astartes turn up, and they have to do a runner for them. Oh no, they don't do that. The group of Astartes turn up, catch them having a meeting, and Magard and Maglehurst are there, and Maglehurst says, now all remembrances are quarantined.
That's it.
You're going to your room, and you'll stay there because we don't want you walking around our ship anymore.
That's it. They start locking down the whole remembrance side of things. And I think that also, I'm sure it happens, but I think that's mirrored on the other flagships of the other Primarchs as well. Was that all of the traitors like, right, these remembrances that have been sent from Terra, we don't really need them anymore. So we'll lock them down.
The remembrances are there to document the war, and now they're going to document what they're seeing, which obviously Horus doesn't want being documented right now, or not on against his terms at the very least. Yeah.
So obviously Cinderman, after that is then right. We've got to go and, Keeler's probably in danger. We've got to go and make sure she's okay. And then obviously that's when they come across Magard.
Yeah.
And he's about to kill her, isn't he? So.
Yeah, I don't think that happens for a little while.
No, it's quite a way.
Quite a way. Oh yeah. So, but you're right. Yeah, because problem is it jumps all over the place, doesn't it? So this all happens like over a couple of days.
Yeah.
But the way it's written, you go back and forth. But you're right. Yeah. So he gets the warning out. He has to. I can't remember how, because he has a guard on his door, and he sort of because he's obviously talks for a living, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He manages to talk his way out of his room past the security.
Yeah, he does talk the guard into it, doesn't he?
Yeah, and the guard sort of says, "Oh, go on then," thinking he's going to go to the sick bay.
Yeah.
He's just an old man. So that's how while he was doing that, he got his message to Cassar, who reels Jonah along with him, and they meet up. Yeah, and then they get to the Saint to save her. And as they walk through the door, Magar's walking through on the far side.
Yeah.
And with murderous intent. And
he's this genetic nut job, and you're like, he's like silent, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to be able to beat him on our own.
And he's been training with the Astartes. I think he's been taking on. They've been doing like enhancements to him as well.
Yeah.
To obviously make him a better warrior. And it's interesting here because he pulls out his gun and shoots them.
Yeah.
And obviously they all close their eyes expecting to be killed.
Yep.
And as Cinderman opens his eyes, he just sees the sort of the burst around Magard's gun, where the rounds come out and Keeler's awake, stopping the bullets, and then passes out. But Magard's frozen in place, which gives them time so they can escape.
Yeah, she comes out of the coma, doesn't she? Just briefly to obviously use these latent powers. You know, are they divine powers from the Emperor? Is it just latent psychic ability? We don't know, but no. Yeah, she uses that power, and as I said, they're then able to take her and sort of hide in the lower decks of the Vengeful Spirit. Yeah,
and they start passing her from place to place, so she's not easily found.
Yeah,
and I think they probably dwell for quite a while underground.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much like they're like the Resistance, aren't they? They're running around, they're hiding in any nook and cranny they can in the lower decks, because they know, now they know that not only are all the remembrances like on lockdown, but like the word of her sainthood is spreading everywhere, and that's another problem that Horus can do without. He doesn't need the human element of his crew and his ship to be distracted by the idea that the Emperor could be a deity, and that there's a saint on board, and all of this sort of stuff could just cause him problems in the day-to-day running of this rebellion or insurrection that he's trying to run. And as with anything for Horus, and it comes later in this book as well, there always seems to be these little things that keep getting in his way. And they are little things to begin with, and they become quite big frustrations for him as time goes on.
Yeah, it's almost like, I think he sort of says it right near the end anyway, but when he sort of takes action. But there's a lot of things where if he hadn't been focused on his own ambition and focused on himself, he probably could have quashed a lot quite early on.
Yeah.
But obviously the scheming sort of takes key. He really enjoyed Erebus's trick on Davin and getting them there, so he's doing that again.
Yeah.
More focusing on setting the game out than actually getting things done at this point, anyway.
Yeah, Erebus is an interesting one in this book, because he was pivotal in the second book. Like you heard about him a little bit in the first book.
Yeah,
he's pivotal in the second book, like really, really pivotal. And then for such a big kind of character, he's still in this one, but you don't see as much of him. Like he's more, he's more
a background player, isn't he?
He is, and he's more involved in maybe some of the architecture in, who to send down to Istvan or Istvan 3 to crush the rebellion, or who may or may not be loyal, as opposed to anything else. And he takes a back seat again. He's done his job and he's caused all sorts of bother, but he's definitely not the focal point as he was in the second book.
But he gets, I think he has a big part to the beginning. So obviously the other three legions arrive, and they have a big planning meeting where they all assemble to lay out their plans for their attack. And it's where Mortarion tells them, well, we received a transmission from Istvan and shows the sort of a battle and a transmission from someone, and can see that it's all gone wrong. And she's saying it's rebellion, and sort of gets everyone's blood up, because obviously they don't like rebellion. They didn't like it on Istvan, and now they're going to have to go and do it all again. Or they didn't like it on Davin, and now they're going to have to do it on Istvan. And but then the Moonaville get to assemble, and as they're going in, Horus says to Loken and Torghadan, "You're here for display, to watch and observe, and you are to say nothing." Clearly saying that I don't want you anymore, but for the time being, I'm keeping up appearances because I don't want you to know what I'm planning yet.
Yeah, that's it. He kind of knows that, as I said, he's already got an idea that the Mournival split, as it did at the end of like the last one, that kind of split is furthering, and he's like, well, we're not going to make it seem too obvious to outsiders yet, but once this progresses, then you're probably going to be in a bit of bother. And I think what's interesting is that obviously the two of them, Togadon and Loken, swore at the end of the last book to fight against the evil in their chapter,
Yeah.
or in their legion, should I say? Not chapters yet, but fight against the evil in their legion. And so this, they go along with it as well. They don't really, push back too hard against Horus at this point. They're kind of just steeling themselves to know that they're probably going to have to fight.
Yeah, and they obviously know it's better to keep their mouths closed and be allowed into at least into the inner circle for now, because they're not going to learn anything if they get themselves kicked out too early.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then we obviously Mortarion and Angron are the two other Primarchs that come, but instead of Fulgrim, we get Eidolon.
Good old Eidolon.
Yeah, lovely man. He's obviously representing the Emperor's Children, brings Sal and Lucius with him.
Yeah.
And then Mortarion, we get to meet briefly Nathaniel Garrow for the first time.
Very briefly.
Who will be key in the next book that we get to. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's also like, there's various bits here as well. And again, they come out in other books, but like, again, the way that fate, all of these books, all of the heresy is like, it does like weigh really heavily into, fate and tragedy. And like, you see like there are things that come along and they are twists of fate that might have otherwise changed Garrow's ultimate destination or fate. And likewise with Sol Tarvitz and Lucius. There's all these moments that happen that they're just like, if that happened a different way, the outcome could have been entirely different. So there is this tragic kind of tale that's woven by these three books, and obviously the Greater Heresy, that's all based on these little moments of fate that could totally change things.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And at the time, they probably think they're very unlucky. Some of them.
Yeah.
They think they're lucky, and then it completely flips around on them as they go along.
As an aside, I don't know if you've ever looked at any of the models on Forge World for the Heresy.
Yeah, I've seen some of them. They look really good.
They're amazing. Like Eidolon's one is actually really good, and Sol Tarvitz is really good as well. I know that's the most recent one. Anyway, that's an aside. Maybe that's one for the podcast about
definitely
Forge World.
Definitely, I saw somebody I was talking to on Instagram showed me they were doing Tarvitz.
Yeah,
and I really liked it, and I like seeing these models from Forge World because it's not what I pictured a lot of them to look like. So it helps you sort of have some sort of basis.
Yeah, it's when I saw the painted one of Sol Tarvitz, it was like same. I wasn't expecting him to look anything like that, and then actually when I thought about it afterwards, I was like, well, yeah, actually it does make sense when you hear the descriptions of the rest of the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim and stuff like that, and you go, okay, that probably does make a lot more sense how they've depicted him.
I'm sure that the model, he's got long blonde hair, hasn't he?
He does, but then that's Fulgrim, isn't it? He's got this long white, like he's the Phoenician, isn't he? So he's this idealistic vision of perfection.
It's really hard for me to picture it. When I'm reading about, especially their size, I just think they've all got buzz cuts or they're skinheads. It's hard for me to picture him in that armor with any sort of long hair.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I think Garrow and Loken fit that description, though. They are more of the high and tight haircut, and off they go. Whereas you've got a few of them like they like the old top knot. So I know Ezekiel Abaddon, he's got his top knot and shaved head. So there's a whole plethora of different hairstyles going on in the Heresy.
Okay.
Solid tangent.
that was a good one. Right. So, going back to Erebus, though.
Yes.
Because as we said, that he doesn't have a lot to do, but he does have the one key moment with Horus where they meet down in the depths of the Vengeful Spirit, and they've constructed sort of a replica lodge from the Moon of Davin, and it's Erebus and Horus meet up, and Erebus says, "Are you ready? You're gonna meet our masters, or I'll meet our allies from the warp now, and we're gonna strike a bargain, but you have to make a sacrifice." And then the sacrifice happens to be Ingmei Singh, the astropath, and she's on the table, and Horus says, "You've betrayed me. You sent a message out, Keela, because obviously by now he knows that Keela's been rescued."
Yeah.
And he fully blames her, and she said, "Oh, well, I'm not going to tell you anything." She sort of goes out a hero, so I'm not going to tell you anything. Just kill me. Before he does, also Regulus is there, and he says, "Come out the shadows. You're part of this. I need you want to be alongside me with the Mechanicum, so you need to be part of this."
Yeah.
And then they sacrifice the astropath by literally, I think he just punches through her chest and rips her heart out.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal with the old. He's a Primarch, so of course he's definitely able to do it. It's just he doesn't really muck about as you can imagine. So it's quite. I think the bits that I find quite interesting with it is that, and it's what you alluded to there. So Erebus doesn't call them like their masters. Like as I said, it's their partners. Their
partners. Yeah.
You know, it's that side of things. Even though we know, and again, this doesn't feed it. Horus doesn't know he's a puppet. He is a puppet, but he doesn't know it yet. And well, he never knows it until right towards the end. But it's interesting that he has this illusion of control, and that he's going to be able to strike some sort of bargain.
Yeah, he really goes in with like a power player sort of mentality to this, where I don't need you, you need me.
It's interesting because that's a theme that presents itself all the time when we're talking about the Chaos Gods throughout the Heresy, is that there's a lot of bargains and deals done, not only by the likes of the Emperor, but also by the likes of the Primarchs. And no matter how good or bad the intentions were, no matter what position of power they felt they were in, the deal always ends up costing them much more than they ever expected. And this is gonna play out that way for Horus, but he definitely goes in thinking, I can control this, and I'm still in control. And it speaks to Erebus's nature as well, is that he knows he's not, but he lets him go along with it.
And I think even the spirit, and I'll mention it, the name of the spirit was called Sarkel, so we'll keep an eye out in case that comes up later on. I don't know if he's a recurring demon. But yeah, so he really does sort of go, like you say, where Rebus lets Horus think he's got the power, because they say, well, we're the ones causing the transmission problems. We're the ones who are making the warp storms.
Yeah.
Because the Emperor's sticking his nose in, and we don't want him to.
Yeah.
And we want you to take your armies and stop him, basically. And then Horus says, well, and I think with that, it's the opening for them to make Horus think, well, they need me more than I need them.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I'm going to finish my task on Istavan, and then if that goes all to plan, then I will help you. And I think the bargain is that they help him traverse and communicate through the warp. And they cloud everybody else's communications. That's sort of the bargain. They help him get his plans in order, and then he will join them, essentially. And the other sort of key moment, I don't know if this is the first time we've seen it, when they kill the astropath, Erebus uses her blood and paints the 8-sided chaos symbol.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the first time we see this in the series so far as well.
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know whether it's popped up on any of the like on the Davin's moon, or on the moon. I don't know if it's mentioned or popped up, but it's never clearly depicted in the way it is here, where that it's the 8-sided or like the 8-arrowed symbol, and it's the fact that Erebus is actually doing it himself. It's the first time it's practically been done by an Astartes in the presence of the others, and at this point you don't really know. We all know what it is, but someone like Horus wouldn't necessarily know what's happening. He just sees him painting something.
Yeah, he's just ritual, isn't it? He knows the Rebus and the word bearers are a bit like that anyway, so it's probably just part of the deal.
Yeah.
And then after that, just to round that bit up, he turns to Regulus and said, "Right, you've seen what's going on. You get back to Mars, have the Fabricator General purge his order,
Yeah.
and get them ready to join me. And obviously, you're assured travel through the warp. You'll get back to Mars, no problem. Off you go."
And spoiler alert to Mechanicum. That you read about a lot of that happening in when you get through to Mechanicum, which you've obviously just finished as well. So
yeah,
it's nice how they link together in that regard.
exactly. And yeah, we'll tie that together in a few books' time, won't we?
Indeed.
And then that sort of ends that whatever phase that is, rounds us up and takes us to Lokin on the Stratagem deck, and starts smelling something he can't quite put his finger on, and follows his nose and finds a new tunnel, I think it's described as, or a crack in the wall big enough for him to walk through that wasn't there before, and it takes him through to a room basically, and he finds the Book of Lorgar in there. And then he has a bit of, I don't know how it's described, he has a bit of a out of body moment where he hears a voice and turns around and Torgadon stood there, but it isn't Torgadon, it's like a possessed version of him, and Torgadon saying, you're a betrayer, and it has a bit of a weird moment where he's sort of having an internal battle with chaos, essentially.
Yeah, and it's. Am I right in thinking that when he's on the Strategium, like previously, I can't remember. I think this is in that area. Previously, they've had like all the battle honors and like it was the Lunar Wolves and the various like flags folded down, and he has a moment where he looks around and he sees ones he doesn't recognize. Yeah,
it's like all of the stuff he recognizes is gone, and they've replaced it with like things from the Serpent Lodge and more tribal decorations, which obviously gets
and a couple of them may or may not be the eight-pointed chaos symbol, but
I don't think he's even seen that yet, even with his experience from previous. That'd probably be just unrecognizable to him.
No, he wouldn't know it for that at this point. But you can bet that there's probably one or two knocking
around. And then he snaps out of that and goes and finds Abaddon. And I think this is the last time where they sort of speak face to face on their own.
Yeah.
And Loken's trying to say, look, it's not too late. You can open your eyes to what's going on and help me. And then Abaddon says, well, you could open your eyes and realize that Horus is doing the right thing. The Emperor doesn't care about us.
Yeah.
And Abaddon pretty quickly, I think, there was clearly something in him that wanted to turn, because he's probably the first one after Horus who's just, I'm up for this. And there's nothing that Loken can say to him, really.
No, I think that's Abaddon's a really interesting one, because it's the, he is, besotted with his gene father. He's besotted with Horus. There's nothing that Horus could say that he wouldn't do. And while Horus is, following the Emperor, that's fine. Abaddon will absolutely follow the Emperor, but he's never followed the Emperor. He's only followed Horus. And that's where you get a lot of the schisms. So, Loken's he's an old school Lunar Wolf. Like he's been around a long time. He's obviously he's not a Terran Lunar Wolf. He is from Cathonia.
Right.
But one of the things that they obviously Horus and a lot of the traitors start working out is that a lot of the Terran-born in the legions are the ones that are going to be, handpicked to take out the Isthvan or Isthvanian rebellion, and I think Loken has a lot more in common with the Terran-born in his legion than he does with maybe those that are closer to Horus. And you see it like in the other legions as well. Like they it's not the Emperor they follow; it's their Primarch.
Yeah.
and that is the powerful bit that causes them to actually turn.
Yeah. Jumping into the next book, you get a really good example of that with Garrow.
Yes.
But we'll save that for next episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I know what you mean. So they have their last sort of chat, and it doesn't go well. But in the meantime, we go to the Emperor's children, who are on Istavan Extremis. I think either a planet or a moon towards.
It's like what is it? It's like an enemy station on Istavan Extremis, which is, I think it's as close to a moon as you can have. Like, it's not a full blown planet.
No, but they've gone there to start squashing this rebellion.
So the Emperor's children of Death Guard are sent to attack the enemy station on Istavan Extremis, and this is where we get into one of those twists of fate that.
You're right.
Garrow. So what they discover is, so there's one of the things that's quite interesting. You get this idea, or this enemy unit that comes up called a War Singer. And I think they may have come up in a previous book as well. Maybe in the second book, or maybe not. But the idea of a War Singer being this person, psyker, maybe corrupted by chaos or using warp powers. You don't really get into it too much.
No.
But they obviously have this kind of sonic weaponry built in, and they sing these songs, or these sonic noises that helps helps the defenders, and also sort of has this physiological effect on the attackers, on the actual humans, and Astartes themselves. And
it's pretty clever the way they do it, because they storm this building. Because you're right, because Eludon and Tarvitz and Lucius are together, and they storm into what they find to be a temple, and the Death Guard are in there fighting already.
Yeah.
And this War Singer's at the top of, I think they described it as a pyramid built out of rocks that didn't belong on that planet.
Yeah.
They were alien building blocks. And the War Singer's at the top, and the mission is to get to that War Singer. And as they're charging up, one of the Emperor's children captains is lifted into the air, and basically his arm is sort of, I think they describe it as like sort of peeled off.
Yeah.
The guy's just brutally sort of ripped apart and thrown aside. And then as they're charging up, get like the twist of fate, Garrow comes flying back down, crashing down hard, and Tarvitz goes over to help him, and he's missing a leg, and he's completely like busted up.
Yeah, he's in pretty bad shape. It's survivable for an Astarte, but bad enough. Yeah, that he's this is going to affect what's going to happen to him next.
So he's taken out. So Tarvitz and Eludon are heading up the mountain, or up the pyramid, and the War Singer is obviously smashing people left, right, and centre. I think Tarvitz gets knocked down, and as he gets to the top finally gets to the top, he sees Eludon down on his knees being berated by the War Singer.
And you think, this is it for Eidolon. He's gone. He's in trouble.
Yeah. And if only he could see the future, he would have left him a few more minutes.
Yeah.
He intervenes long enough for Eludon to get on his feet, and then he starts screaming at the War Singer, and his jaw says on there, it just opens and keeps going and going to an unnatural point, and he's able to just crush the War Singer as well, and they kill him together.
Yeah, it's like this mad sonic scream that Tarvitz is like, in the midst of battle, he's just like, he almost can't believe it. He's like, we'll get this done, and then I'll process what I've seen.
Yeah.
Interesting, as I said, slight tangent here as well. It's an interesting in part of the whole Emperor's Children and Slanesh, and what I think they've done really well here is, back in, I think it's 3rd edition, you used to get Slanesh Noise Marines, these little miniatures, these, I don't know where they came up with the idea, but it's amazing. And they're basically Space Marines with guitars.
I've seen them.
Incredible. incredible little minis, and you just think to yourself, how on earth are they going to get that into the narrative? How are they going to make this seem serious? And then actually, this you'll see it come to more fruition when we get to Fulgrim. But Eidolon's Sonic Scream is the start of how they can actually make these noise marines a thing that you actually then look back on and go, oh, okay, all right, that is a real thing, and yeah, maybe I would like to paint one of those minis in punk rock noise marine.
Yeah, definitely. They've got the platform boots and the big hair, haven't they? I've
like
seen that.
Punk
They look great.
Like zebra print helmets, and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, I love it. But and again, this is another. I'm glad that I sort of come back and read this as well, because in Fulgrim it all makes complete sense. But the first time I read it, I was like, I'm not too sure what to make of this at the time.
Yeah.
But obviously it pays off so well in Fulgrim, which we will do.
We'll get to that one. Got a couple of books to go yet.
Yeah. So I think then the next bit that happens is we have a bit of a break, and then this battle's done and dusted. They've killed the Warsinger. They've taken over the temple. So they're back onto the ship of the Emperor's Children.
Yep.
And Tarvitz seeks out Eliodon, and they actually have quite a good conversation for a time, because he's sort of questioning him and saying, what was that? He said, I'm leading from the front. That's what a leader does. We lead from the front. That's all you saw.
Yeah.
And Tarvitz isn't quite buying it, so he takes him to see Fabius Bile in the lab.
Yeah.
And they sort of say, look, we've been experimenting with the gene seed. We're striving for perfection. That's what we do. And we found a way to do it.
Yeah.
And they offer him the chance to, this is Sal's sort of making his own fate here, because they offer him the chance to improve himself, step forward, because Eliodon says, you're nothing more than a line officer. You'll never be a leader.
Yeah.
You're just a line officer. But here you go. We'll take you into the fold, and you can have these advancements made to yourself. And Tarvitz is disgusted by it completely. Yeah. And I think
what was interesting was I was when I remember reading this part, I was really surprised that Eidolon even gave him the chance, because him and Eidolon, they don't get on, or there's not that much respect for them. And this part was like, I was reading it, I was like, oh, maybe Eidolon's all right, like knowing that he's still but like, oh, okay, it was very much a 50-50, and I was really surprised that he was like almost giving Tarvitz this opportunity. Like you would have thought, if it had been a different marine, if it had been, say, if you'd put Abaddon in this, it wouldn't be giving him the offer. He'd be taking him down to this secret laboratory to kill him, not to give him the option of enhancements. And obviously, Tarvitz, being the good loyal soldier that he is disgusted that they're tampering with the Emperor's design, which I think is more of his problem. It's like, it's not, if the Emperor had turned around and said to Fabius Bile, do you know what, you go nuts, you can muck around as much as you like, Tarvitz would probably be like, yep, fine, open me up, give me a Sonic Scream, let's go for it. But because it's something that is not not on the books, as it were, it's almost heretical.
Well, he goes to say, doesn't he? So, well, I'm going to go and tell Fulgrim what's going on, and they say, well, who do you think told us to do it?
Yeah,
which he either blows his mind. I don't think he quite believes it, but then again, same boat as Loki, and he's like, well, something's clearly not right.
There's evil at the heart of my legion, and I think the other bit I like is we get another minute introduction to Fabius Bile, one of the best named characters in the 40k lore, one of the best minis as well, if you ever if you've ever seen it. But you don't get too much more from him here, but I can't wait to read more about him, because I love the character, and I just love the name and how his lore is put together. So I'm looking forward to read a bit more about him.
He was never destined to be a good guy with that name, was he?
Really not. Like you just know with that one.
Yeah, some people, it's just, you can just see it a mile off.
Yeah.
But going back to like Elidon giving him the chance. Do you think, because obviously we know from Murder, where Tarvitz showed him up basically and said that your plan sucked.
Yeah.
And then Torgadon and Loken sort of coming down and praising Tarvitz for leadership. So that sort of that was the first wick against him.
Yeah.
But do you think maybe he knows that even though all the way through these books he's been saying you're a line officer, you'll never amount to anything, you'll never be one of Fulgrim's chosen, you're just your file, that's where you're going to be. He obviously knows that Tarvitz is more than that, but there's the threat there. But do you think because of what happened in that battle where Tarvitz actually did save his life, do you think that was his one going, well, you could be useful to us, so here's your one chance, I'll give you one, and then with him turning around and saying I'm not up for it, that made Elidon's mind up, then made it easy for him, he knows where he stands.
Yeah, that's fair, because I think, you know, I think what surprised me about it is not only that he gave him the opportunity, but it does make sense that, you know, it does make it easy for Eidolon to just go, you know, there's no 50-50 then. He knows that, so, you know, we need to send him down to his stand with the rest of the loyalists because he's never going to turn. I think what maybe surprised me is that Eidolon and, you know, the others weren't offering it, or weren't seen to be offering it to more of them. Because, as I said, I've always thought, you know, Lucius has always put himself out as, you know, very ambitious and kind of career driven. And it's almost like his begrudging friendship with Sol has kind of held him back.
Yeah.
And you know that if Eidolon had come to Lucius and said, you know, do you want this? He would have just gone, yep.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. He would have taken anything, because he jokes about it. But even in the last book, his spars against Loken, I think if Loken had said, well, let's do this to the death, he'd have been up for it, because he knows he's so confident and he knows he's better than everybody in his own mind. And that is it. He's been loyal to Tarvitz, probably just down to placement more than anything. They just happen to have come up in the same squads or whatever through their career. So maybe it's a friendship of familiarity. I can't even say it. You say it for me.
I think you nailed it. Familiarity. Yeah.
Familiarity. Anyway, so that's where his loyalty sort of ends, I think, with him. But anyway, we wrap up part one with two small parts because Loken meets Torgadon back on the Vengeful Spirit, where he's told, oh, by the way, we're getting ready to land on Istvan. Me and you, we've been given the honor of the Spearhead.
Yeah.
And he's like, great, I'd be so happy to take my company with me. And he says to him, well, actually, this has been assigned squad by squad.
Yeah. It's been a really weird, you know, it's like, right, it's like a hand-picked nature of the assault force, and it's like this, you know, you can already see like Loken's feeling that it's a bit strange, and he also, I think he questions why. I think he takes it, but he wonders why him and Torgadon, who are out of favour, have been given the what is normally considered an honour to lead the spear tip. That normally, if you know, it was any other battle, it would have been Abaddon and Aximand. Because they're out of favour, why are they being given the chance to earn honour and glory? And so it raises, you know, a little bit of suspicion, but they don't have. I mean, Loken particularly doesn't really have time to question it too much before he knows it. He's, you know, they're
on their way.
Yeah, they're in and out the door before they really realise it.
It's quite funny because as they're sort of talking about it, Torgadon just says, "Well, don't look a good thing and turn it away. We can go down, do a bit of fighting, and when we come back, we'll work it all out from there."
Yeah,
acting like going to war is a quick break from the real life that they have to deal with as a distraction, which is quite funny because he's just not serious at all, is he? At all. No. Which is great. And then we have the Titan crew. We have a quick cut to the Titan crew on board the Disarray, and Jonah catches Kassar praying and says, "You need to be careful. If the Princeps catches you, you're dead."
Yeah.
And that was just a quick bit. But then we go back, onto the Vengeful Spirit. And as you said before, this is where Loken seeks out the half herd and says, "If you find Cinderman, Keeler, and Mercedes, can you look after him for me? Because the half herd's not been." He's not going to Istvan, and he hasn't been put into the second wave or the pacification force. He said, "I've not even got a place in the tasking, so yeah, I can do that for you."
It's interesting. It's that this old, as I said, half heard, forgotten character or forgotten captain, actually has a really important piece or part to play, where he almost gets his he gets his honor back, as it were. And, he doesn't even know how he lost it in the first place. But it's interesting that he's almost, because he's forgotten, even by the likes of Horus, that he's free to take up that role.
Yeah, and obviously you don't see a lot of him really, but there's been a couple of times where him and Loken have had a conversation. So there's a little bit of respect that's built up over, especially from the last book, just because he's given Loken some advice. And I think here, when they're having a chat, Loken sort of gives it back and says, "Yeah, respect the old ways. The old ways are dying," and that really appeals to Cruz and makes him want to help. Not that he knows it quite what that's going to mean for him yet.
No, it's very different. But we'll come to that, because I think it's in the Eisenstein. He has when he's about, maybe at the end of this one, but it may be in the Eisenstein. We'll see when I get to my notes at that point. But he has one of the key quotes about the whether he's Sons of Horus or a Lunar Wolf.
Yeah.
And it's the half herd that actually says it, and that makes it quite impactful.
I know exactly what you're saying, and that's we will get to that in this one.
Okay.
Cool. And then the last part of part one is back with the Emperor's Children, where Eliodon reveals that he's not leading the spear tip for this mission. He won't be going down. And going back to the conversation he literally just had with Tarvitz about leaders lead, Tarvitz is thinking, well, that's suspicious.
Yeah.
And sort of really cements the last part of his, I need to find out what's going on this ship, because it's not right.
Yeah, and it's, as I said, it's interesting because this is happening across all four traitor sort of legions, and each one of them is hand picking their assault force as opposed to deploying a company.
Yeah,
and it's only Tarvitz. I mean, Loken's, he's raising an eyebrow to it, but as you said, Torgadon's just said, don't worry about it, and off we pop.
Yep.
Whereas Tarvitz actually has the time to think about what's going on, and that kind of then moves us from, the moment where they're dropping into part 2 of the book.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the Choral City.
Yes.
Which is a lovely name. I always thought it fits quite nicely with the war singer motif.
Yeah, and it probably was quite nice until they started smashing drop pods all over the place.
Well, I mean, the drop pods, if they knew what was coming after the drop pods, they'd just have taken the drop pods.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think the last thing that actually happens is that Tarvitz goes and seeks out Ancient Rylanor, the Dreadnought. He's one of the oldest members of the Emperor's Children, but isn't it? He's put into the Dreadnought because he got wounded beyond saving, and the only way to do it was to embed him into a Dreadnought.
So I couldn't remember whether that happened at the end of part 1 or at the start of part 2. But it's Tarvitz's suspicions are, because he's suspicious, he talks his way out of being on that assault force. But as you said, going to the Ancient Rylanor, who is again, if anyone that's interested, just Google this guy or the Dreadnought, because his story as well continues far beyond just this book, even though it might seem that he's at an end. But yeah, that as I said, whole Dreadnought lore is that when a Starty is broken down or wounded to a certain degree that they can't be saved, but they're not dead. They can get interred into into the Dreadnought sarcophagus and live on, bringing the Emperor's wrath to their enemies.
Yeah.
And there's a few notable examples, but like Rylanor is one of those that, as I said, he's got some great lore about him. And then there's a few others that are knocking around, like I think it's Bjorn the Fell-Handed in the Space Wolves is like he fought in the Heresy, and is still going in today, as it were, in the.
Oh wow!
You can still have him as a character, but he's a Dreadnought. He was obviously fighting as a Marine back then, but he's now a Dreadnought character. So
oh, okay.
Yeah, I do like the idea of Dreadnoughts. I think they're quite cool, and I'm sure Tommy will tell you all about the Dreadnoughts you can get for the Blood Angels. There's a few good ones there.
Yep. Yeah. We'll again note that down for one of the podcasts. We'll get that up.
Not allowed them for Chaos anymore, unfortunately.
Okay.
You now get rather than get Chaos Dreadnoughts, you get Hell Brutes.
Oh yeah, I've seen. Are they tangent? Are they essentially the same thing but for Chaos?
They are. So back in the day, you used to just actually get Chaos Dreadnoughts, and then GW kind of made a change to the lore and sort of said, rather than them having Chaos Dreadnoughts, you get Hell Brutes, which is effectively a Chaos warped version of a Dreadnought anyway.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But that we digress again.
A tangent, yes.
Yeah. So Coral City, we've got the World Eaters landing on the outskirts, and as they come out of their drop pods, instead of coming across soldiers, they're just swamped by all the civilians, thousands of civilians, screaming at them and swamping them, which makes their journey into the palace that much more difficult.
Yeah.
Lokin is with Vipus and his squad, and their drop pod mislands, and it ends up crashing into the spires 200 meters up above on the top of the palace.
Yeah.
Which, reading it sounds like the way that Lokin describes it is they knew where they were supposed to land, but the spires weren't accounted for.
Yeah.
They say these spires aren't supposed to be here, and Lokin says to himself, well, someone's going to pay for this mistake. But made me think, well, I don't think it was a mistake. Maybe they thought if we can take out some of these before they even land, it makes it more like, obviously, because the plan that's unfolding makes it more obvious. There's less resistance later on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a bit of that to it. I think, on your point, the worst legion to land in the midst of a load of civilians is the World Eaters. Because obviously, they're the type that just go nuts, bloodlust. So it's almost like it's as I said, it's like it's a careful plan that's been set for these for this assault unit or these assault units to come down and almost get the worst out of them. Yeah,
definitely. And then we have the Emperor's Children start at the bottom by the palace entrance, and the Death Guard are out in the city or out in the streets, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's sort of separated, but the target seems to be, let's get to the palace.
The Siren Hold, I believe.
The Siren Hold is what it's called, yes. And while they're landing, Tarvitz is sneaking around back on his ship.
Yeah, so he's gotten off of drop pod duty and is like Rylanor's going down in his place.
Yeah, he offered, because it was the captain who was killed by the war singer was supposed to have a certain job on the ship, and he manages to talk his way into that job.
Yeah.
And he goes down to the gun decks, and I think it's an adept says, "Oh yeah, everything's loaded up, ready to go." And he said, "Oh, what are we? Why are we pointing the guns towards the planet? Our people are down there. We're not planning a bombardment." And they say, and then obviously he says, "Yep, the warheads are loaded. We'll be firing the virus bombs on Horus's order."
Yep.
And that sort of kicks him right in the arse, give him the call to action now, because he knows we're betrayed. This, I think he thinks.
But that's it. That's the moment. Because what's the virus? It's what's it?
World Eater.
World Eater. It is World
yeah,
Eater.
Yeah, the virus bomb, the World Eater.
Yeah, and like all of the Astartes, you know, they know about it. They know what it is, like dread, and it's like one of these, you know, deplorable weapons that is only used at the very, you know, it can only be sanctioned by the War Master, and previous to that, the Emperor, because it's like, you know, it's the whole idea of exterminatus, isn't it? It's like such a deadly biological weapon that it's designed to like rampage through biological beings and burn itself out, so that it wipes them out quickly, but it wipes everyone out, and then you're ready to start fresh.
Yeah.
And PC is like, whoa.
Yeah, it even says even the Emperor didn't like using it, and I don't think they used it very many times. But yeah, so that scares him. And then on the deck of the Vengeful Spirit, Erebus comes to Horus, who has got rid of everything to do with the Lunar Wolves, and any decoration they did have now is completely gone, and
all the old banners.
Now is his intention and his allegiance is out in the open now. There's no hiding it.
Yeah.
And Erebus comes to him and says, the wolves have destroyed the towers of Prospero. Unfortunately, Magnus survived the Space Wolves, which doesn't cheer Horus up too much at this point, because it's another thing, like you said, another little thing that just hasn't gone his way.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing, that one, because again, it's one of these bits and pieces that they put out there, and if you weren't aware of the further lore, you'd be like, well, what, you know, wolves, like what like Magnus, what's that got to do with anything? But again, that's one of those little details that, you know, will pay off in subsequent books, and you learn, like, you know, what Horus has done to try and engineer that particular eventuality. But yeah, we won't get into that right now.
The only sort of hint we've had was obviously in the last sort of line of the last book, was when Horus was saying, well, I've got Lehman Russ going over to, the Emperor sent him to go and get Magnus back to Terra, but I've intercepted and told him to kill him. So that's all we've heard from now. And obviously you're on you've just done Thousand Suns, so I'm assuming hopefully it'll pay off there.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely pays off there.
Okay.
It's really, as I said, when you get to it, it's amazing. As I said, Thousand Suns is now. I wasn't really expecting to like the book. You know, sometimes you look at it and you go, oh, I don't know how that will be. I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to like that particular book. It's now one of my favourites out of the ones I've done. It really does pay off a lot of stuff, and it's one of those ones that comes back to being quite fast paced, because obviously, as we said, like, you know, Descent of Angels and a few of the others between now and then, you know, their pace changes a little bit. Mechanicum's a good example. It's like it's a great book, but the pace is forced a little bit in that, you know, you're learning a whole new, like, universe, as it were, as you've mentioned before. So it is really good, and it does really pay off. But we'll save that for later.
We'll get to that. Cool. So back on track. So Tarvitz steals a Thunderhawk, and he's going to go down to the planet. And I don't think he's really got a plan, has he? I think
he doesn't really.
He's just going to go to the planet and say, by the way, we're in trouble.
Yeah, like if he stays on the ship, he's dead, because he shouldn't be there. Like, you know, people will know he's up to something. He's not going to turn traitor, so he's not going to be able to do anything on his own. So if he stays on the ship, he's in trouble. So he goes, I've got to try and get down to the surface somehow and save what loyalists he can. So he's like, right, we'll get in the Thunderhawk and we'll blitz it, and we'll see what can happen. And obviously he's pursued by other gunships. I think there are other Thunderhawks from his legion.
Yeah.
Who are chasing him.
And as fate would have it, he comes across a broken down old frigate. I don't know if it's a frigate or
I think it is a frigate.
and he gets challenged by somebody. Says, "Who are you?" He says, "It's Tarvitz. We're betrayed." And then Garrow comes on and says, "Are you sure?" And he says, "Look, because they're old friends, aren't they? I think that's established in the scene previously. It's established that they're old friends." And he says, "Look, the War Master's betrayed us. He's going to bomb the people on the planet. He's going to kill them all.
Yeah,
we need to get word out." And then Garrow says, it goes silent because Tarvitz expects that he's going to be the one who's blown up, but instead, Garrow says to him, "I've blown those ships that were chasing you. They've been destroyed. I'll tell the War Master that I destroyed you.
Yeah.
You get to the planet and do what you got to do, and I will go and find another legion, try and find Rogel Dawn and warn him."
Yeah. So it sets it up there for obviously the next book in the series, the Flight of the Eisenstein. But it's another one of those moments where you see that, like, the cross legion brotherhood, because Tarvitz is again pivotal, because obviously he knows Loken, and they've got like a sworn battle brotherhood, and it's the same with Tarvitz and Garrow.
Yeah.
So they're like they have this, because that's the point where it goes silent. Garrow is he's in his head. He's not sure. He's like, every bit part of him is, he knows he should shoot him down, because that's what he should do as a good soldier. But the other side of him, he knows that this is his battle brother, sworn oaths of like loyalty and camaraderie, and he goes, he wouldn't be doing this if it really didn't mean something. Like, this is not something he would just do. So, I know we'll come into it with the Eisenstein, but obviously the crew of the Eisenstein, they can't believe what's going on. They can't believe that effectively Garrow has shot down, to their mind, loyalist Thunderhawks. For this tearaway nutcase who's going down to Istan free on a whim. So it's again, it's those moments of fate.
I think again it shows that Ediodon was holding Tarvitz down, calling him a file officer, because you've got soldiers, other captains of companies respect him more than they do the hierarchy of the Emperor's children. Everybody hears Tarvitz's name, who's friends with him, knows that he is honourable and he's a good man. So I think it makes it that much easier for him to believe him.
That's it. And then obviously, the Eisenstein then warps out. But there's more to that when we get into the flight of. And then I believe we go back to, so Tarvitz is on his way to the surface. Yeah. And then on the actual surface, it's the, like, as I said, by this point, we know that all of the people on there are, the Marines or the Astartes that have been deemed too loyal to the Emperor by their Primarchs. And they're kind of split up. They're all over the place. You've got the World Eaters chopping their way through Fanatics. You've got the Sons of Horus, or the Lunar Wolves, who have been crashed in the spires and working their way towards the Siren Hold, but with difficulty, and it's taken them a lot longer than they want to be. And I think the other thing I forgot about Vipers. You forget these little sub characters within the units that Loken's part of, and I really liked Vipers as a character.
Yeah, I think we did him a disservice so far, because in the last episode we skimmed over him quite a lot, but he's actually Loken's best friend.
Yeah.
I think we skimmed him, but he really is Loken's right hand man. I know that Torgadon's obviously come into it from joining the Mourneville, but Vipers has been with him the whole time.
Torgadon's like his peer, right? He's like it's the same level of in the the hierarchical military structure, whereas Vipers is more like it's his sergeant. He's the one that when their backs are against the wall, he's always had Vipers. And you kind of, as you said, you're right. We probably did a bit of a disservice, and it's just nice that he gets to. At this point, it is a bit refreshing for Garrow, because right now he doesn't know what's happening in terms of Tarvitz inbound to the city, all he knows is that they're fighting through it, but he's able to fight through with his Astartes and Vipers as an example. People that he's fought with for years now, and it's almost like a sense of relief that he's just getting on with something rather than all this mystery and intrigue and treachery that's
back to basics.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you can see it's almost like a weight's lifted while he's getting on with it. The Death Guard are in the trench works. I think that's important. They're working their way, as you'd imagine, from the Death Guard, very matter of fact, grinding their way through the trenches. And then you've got the Emperor's children, they're attacking the Precentor's palace, I believe. They're
bursting into the throne room, I think.
That's it.
When we join them again.
Lucius is front and center, ready to take the glory.
And he's got Rylanor hosing people down for him so he can get up and close. And then, I don't think we mentioned him, but they're looking for Prowl, who was, I believe, the senator or whoever was in charge. The governor?
Rebel governor, that's it. Yeah.
So they're looking for Prowl, who they find in the throne room. And Lucius manages to fight him. But it's interesting because it's mentioned here that throughout the battles on this planet that Lucius has been sort of seeing and hearing, like what they call the Song of Death, which has been helping him fight, where he's seeing moves before they're happening. He's just sort of one step ahead of the game, which is also we know that he's a great swordsman and he seems to just pick up a weapon and he can fight with it. But here it sort of says that there's something else going on. It's not quite clear, and I don't think he knows what it is, but he hears this Song of Death and it just helps him effortlessly. And he goes in, and you think that this Prowl is going to be a bit of a boss character to fight, but he pretty much kills him in a few moments, doesn't he?
Doesn't take him long, and you can just imagine, like, he's got his face is all scarred up where he's been scarring himself, and there's stuff going on with the Emperor's children. With Eidolon and Bile and Fulgrim's got the Anaphane, and again, all of this makes a load more sense when you get through Fulgrim as well. But it's just nice little like breadcrumbs that lead you towards it, so you go, okay, I see what was going on there. Because Lucius, he is an interesting character in the entire.
He really is. Yeah, and he only gets more interesting towards the end of this.
Yes.
But before we get to that, we quickly go back up to the Vengeful Spirit, because Keela is having visions of the treachery that's about to happen.
She's premonitioning, isn't she? She's having premonitions. Yeah. Which
brings her out of her coma, and she tells Sindaman this is happening, and warns him that the end is near, essentially.
Yeah.
And that causes Sindaman to have one sort of final gathering, religious gathering, where he officially denounces the War Master and says, "We have been betrayed. We've followed him across the stars. We've followed him. We've killed countless civilizations in the Emperor's name. We've done this for a purpose, and now the War Master's turned on the Emperor, and he's doing it for his own gain. And we need to denounce him, and we need to say the Emperor is now our God, and he will guide us through this. And we need to take faith in that." And it's really cements now. Like if it hadn't before, now the Emperor is God, isn't he? This is the start.
That's it. They're there's no other. And again, it's I suppose it's that human factor, isn't it? There's for Sindaman and the likes, like they've got what they consider, a saintly being that's performed miracles next to them. They don't have any other hope. Like there's no other hope. They're stuck on the Vengeful Spirit, the flagship of Horus. All of the the Astartes that would hold him to account are on Istvan 3, more than likely about to be bombed. And all they've got is this faith, this faith that somehow the Emperor, the deity, the god of humankind, is going to deliver them from this predicament they find themselves in. So it's quite interesting in the nature of faith, just in that regard. But they're that's it. They're all ready and they're good to go. And I think Cinderman and Mercedes are kind of leading it, and I don't think it happens yet, but it's obviously Cinderman is aware, like, it's time to denounce him, and a bit later on, obviously, they're the remembrances all gathered together. Yeah, they're all summoned.
That pretty much happens at the end of this chapter that we're on. So it's not too far. They have this big meeting where they say, right, Horus bad, Emperor good, and then Maglehurst summons all the remembrances to a viewing chamber, and under the pretense of you wanted to see war, we're gonna show you war. So come along and watch. And Cinderman, Keeler, and Mercedes obviously go, and they're all talking on the way and saying, this is a trap. And Keeler says, yeah, of course it's a trap, but we're going to go anyway. But we come back to them in a little bit.
Yes.
Because back on Istvan 3, Loken and Vipers managed to tie up with Torgodon, and they come out into a chamber and they have their own war singer to fight.
Yeah.
Which I think is obviously there for another encounter with something a bit chaosy, demony for them. But it doesn't go into too much detail, but they do destroy it. They manage to kill it eventually. And then as that happens, Tarvitz lands on, as he's landing, he flies over the Emperor's children and manages to give Lucius a message.
Yeah.
And essentially says, we're betrayed. We've been handpicked to come down here to die. And Lucius is absolutely pissed off.
He's not happy.
And he's like, why? Like, why would I be sent down here? And Tarvis even says to him, it's because you're my friend.
Yeah.
That is why. But you carry on. I'm going to go and warn the others. And Lucius keeps killing because that's what he wants to do.
Isn't Lucius tasked with getting the message out to the is it the Sons of Horus and
Sons of Horus? Yeah. And I think Tarvis goes to the World Eaters
and the Death Guard.
And I think Lucius is, because he's going in. He's in the palace anyway.
Yeah.
So he can go and find and tell the Sons of Horus.
What's interesting is because of the nature of Lucius and his ambition as well as his vanity. Is like he starts resenting Tarvitz, or he comes, that explodes a little bit more as the book goes on. But it's
all the subtle looks he's given him, or the little snide comments he's made over the last two and a half books. This really cements it, where he's like, yeah, we were friends, but for God's sake, look where I am now because of you.
Yeah.
I should be Fulgrim's right hand man, and because I've looked after you essentially, now this is where I am, and he doesn't take that very well.
No. No, he struggles with that.
Yeah, and then we go on board the Titan, where they've been supporting the Death Guard down in the trenches.
They have, yeah.
Princeps receives a transmission, and then he says, right, ceasefire, lock down all the hatches.
Yep.
We're going to biohazard mode. Right, let's lock down. He doesn't tell anyone what's going on, but he just tells them to be careful. So,
well, isn't it like at that point that what's his name?
Kassar.
Yeah, he's surprised. He's like, at this point, he doesn't realize, because it's not only that they're being betrayed. Some of the some of the people, even Lucius is speaking to, stuff like that, they believe that actually it's the Istvans have got a chemical weapon.
Yeah, and that's, I think, for quite a while, that's how everybody sort of perceives it, apart from the people that directly Tarvitz is getting to.
Yeah.
But Kassar doesn't know that at the minute. He just, okay, we're closing down.
They must have chemical weapons, and that's what a lot of the Astartes and the troops actually believe. They're like, right, okay, the Istvans have got chemical weapons. They're surprised, but they're like, okay, they've got them. It can't possibly be our own
Yeah,
virus bombs.
because Tarvitz he then lands and catches up with the World Eaters and the captain who's leading them, and he warns them, says there's a virus bomb incoming, but he doesn't tell them that they've been betrayed, because obviously he just must not know him and know how he would take it. So he gets them into the bunker.
Yeah.
And as they're doing that, back on the Vengeful Spirit, Horus and Maglehurst are showing the remembrances. They're all watching, and this is when he says, right, launch the missiles. And it's at that point where Cinderman looks around and realizes that the walls are lined with Astartes.
Yeah.
Which obviously is very discomforting. But then they get to watch the full horror of the virus bombs.
Because Horus is like, you wanted to see war. This is war, and like shows them the full horrors. And like, I think if I remember correctly, like a lot of the sons of Horus and Emperor's children make it into safety or find safety, and it's only some of the World Eaters and some of the Death Guard that actually get to safety themselves.
The Death Guard must get it the worst out of everyone, because
they're
out in the open, and obviously the World Eaters have been struggling to break through the hordes of civilians. So they were on the outskirts, so they get a full whack of it. The Death Guard are out in the trenches. Those who aren't getting into cover straight away, they're getting a full whack of it. Yeah, the Emperor's children and Sons of Horus are all mostly inside anyway, so they do all right. But I really enjoyed the way that it's described how this virus sort of bursts into the air, and it's like instant slow. Well, it's not slow death; it's a quick and painful death.
Yeah.
And it's sort of saying that it's just hitting people, and you just melt, turn to mush, you just rot and decay.
They're like turning inside out, aren't they? It's this like the biological weapon to, it's gene engineered to within an inch of what it needs to do to just burn.
And it
through.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whether it's water, tree, or man, it's killing it. And it says like the Astartes are outside that. They've got cracks in their armor from fighting. That's how it's getting into these pressure sealed suits. But even the tiniest crack in like under their arm, that's how it gets in, and it's turning them to slush, and they're just falling down, turn to slush inside their armor. And it describes there's a war singer flying around, trying to ease the pain of its people.
Yeah.
Even that gets hit by the virus and dies in a burst of pain and stuff. And it just absolutely, it's really quick as well. It's like hit, and it just spreads, covers where it needs to cover really quickly. I don't think the virus lasts very long at all.
No, it as soon as it's run out of, because that's the way it's designed, isn't it? So it's kind of like this, as I said, this exterminatus protocol. So it burns through everything from a biological point of view, and then is designed to burn itself out. So there's nothing left to eat.
Yeah,
it just dissipates, like it itself dies, and all that's left in its wake is the putrid gases from all of the organic matter that's been eaten alive by this virus. And then that's why they then follow up with the firestorm strike.
Yeah. Which comes shortly after, but because we've got the Remembrances watching on in horror, and while everyone's distracted, Keeler leads Mercedes and Cinderman over to the half herd.
Yeah,
and they say,
Acton
they say, can you help us? And he goes, oh, Loken told me to look out for you.
Yeah,
and they say this is bad, and I think they all agree that everything that's happening is bad. And he says, and I think I know why Loken asked me to look after you. And he manages to get them out of the room and take them towards safety. And at the same time, Horus turns to the Remembrances and said, well, you got what you wanted. Unfortunately, you won't be documenting anything.
Yeah.
And gives the order, and the Astartes just mow them down. I think there must have been hundreds, maybe thousands of people in this room.
Yeah.
Not too sure. Obviously, it was all of them that were there. Are just absolutely eradicated from one more problem off of Horus's list.
That's it. Yep, ticked. Like
Yeah.
again, and another, also check mark on his descent into full bad guydom.
Yeah, yeah. I think we could probably wrap up Cruz, Mercedes, and Cinderman here because they go to the loading bay to jump on a ship, and lo and behold, Maggard's waiting for him.
He is indeed.
He can't get enough. Like he is a man with a bone, isn't he?
He is
a dog with a bone. And he and Cruz actually get into a fight now, don't they? Which is quite good. They both shoot each other and miss, and they get into hand-to-hand combat. And
they're fairly evenly matched, aren't they? Like because Maggard's been like gene enhanced, and Acton is he isn't a starter, but he's obviously he's old, like he's slowed down a little bit, so it's quite an even fight. Yeah,
and he hasn't been. I don't think he's been in any of the battles that we've seen so far. He's always on the ship.
Yeah.
So he's obviously needs dusting off, and they're fighting to the death, and they're getting to a point where I think they're sort of in a hold, and Maggard's overpowering them slightly, and they've both got enough wounds on them. But Cinderman picks up Cruz's pistol, and jams it into an open wound and just blows him away, and manages to kill Maggard there. So he manages to kill Maggard, and they then jump onto their escape ship, and like you say, they're going, and that's when they're intercepted by the Eisenstein, and
Healer guides them.
Yeah, and Cruz says, "Well, what do I say? Like they're going to know we're traitor," and she says, "Just tell the truth." And then that's what he says. I'm Acton Cruz. I'm a lunar wolf.
Yeah.
And
the moment.
Garrow says, "Come aboard."
Yeah. I really like that moment. It was, as I said, for Acton Cruz, like it felt like, as I said, it's like years of being the half herd. He's got like this redemptive story.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not a son of Horus. I'm a lunar wolf. And it it almost feels like he's reinvigorated by that kind of affirmation of who he is.
Yeah, it brings him to life because it says, doesn't it, like he's obviously been there from the beginning when he was a Chthonian. They were just running around as tribe. I don't know if they were tribesmen or they run around as thugs, I think he says.
Yeah.
And then he's brought to the level of Astartes, and they've been killing machines, and he's just gone along with it and gone along with it and gone along with it, and he's seen all these changes, and he's never put a foot out of line. He's just done what he's told, and that's how he's ended up in his position of he's still a captain, but he's just ignored, sort of. And this brings him. I think it, like you said, reinvigorates and brings his spark back, and will definitely pay off in the next book. But that's where we leave. I think that's the last we get of them now for this book.
That is, that's the last we see of these guys.
Yeah. So then we have Tarvitz back on Istvan 3, and that's when he tells the World Eater captain, look, this wasn't the Istvans, this was us, because like you said, this is the Firestorm's released now, and the captain's like, well, clearly they haven't firestormed and if they may have poisoned us or virus bombed us, but they haven't firestormed us as well. They've come from above, because I think when the virus bombs gone off, they were too busy hunkering down, but now they've got the advantage of looking where the bombs are coming from.
Yeah.
And then he says, we're betrayed.
Yeah.
And Tarvis has to sort of break it to him.
The nature of the orbital strike gives it all away, and it's like they all realise now, all of the loyalists, as they're now effectively known, like realise that they're not only are they betrayed, not only are they supposed to be wiped out, but that Horus is the arch traitor, and now it's like all of you know, they're all coming to the realization that their duty is, you know, to do whatever they can to effectively slow him down, because there's nothing else they can do.
No, and they need to, because I think Tarvis says, look, we've got someone on the way to warn other Primarchs and bring help.
Yeah.
We need to drag this out so Horus can be brought to justice. And then the firestorm sort of burns itself out just as quick as the virus bomb. And then we get some gunships come in and land. And lo and behold, Angron jumps out, followed by his loyal or his traitor world eaters now. And they just make towards where Tarvis is hiding out. And the captain... I don't know if his name's here because I keep calling him the world eater captain, but he
it's Captain Erlin.
Erlin, there you go.
And so because that part obviously will come into it, but the Angron spearhead starts us off in part 3 of the book, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas
it does.
The one part that I think has happened in part 2 is the conflict on the bridge of the Dies Irae.
Yeah. So like you say, so that lands there. We go to the Dies Irae where they start bringing their shields back online and opening the guns and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, they're bringing it all back on, and it's where Cassar realizes that the only way, or the truth about this and how they were able to ride out both the strike and the firestorm is that the Princeps Terne must have been pre-warned. He must have known what's happening, and so he understands the level of betrayal. And obviously, he's got his reluctant friend Jonah also on the bridge with him, and he's pleading with him to help. To help him and help the God Emperor.
Because he says you've seen the things that I've seen. You know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's cemented because as things are going back and all the Astartes on the ground are coming out, the Princeps gives the order to fire on the Loyalist Death Guard.
Yeah.
And that's where Cassar does say, no, I'm not having that anymore. And does, like you say, begs his friend, who he thinks is his friend, to help him. And he pulls his pistol on the Princeps.
Yeah.
And the Princeps pulls his pistol on him, and they fire at each other, and they both get into cover. And the Princeps is able to escape through a hatch, and that's when the two friends. He's saying, "Well, are you going to help me now?" And they're talking, and Jonah's not having it, is he?
He doesn't like the talk of the Emperor being God. He's also, he's thinking of his career.
Yeah, he says, I want to be Princeps one day.
Yep.
I want to be a Princeps, and that's not going to happen if I go along with you. Completely disregarding what's good or bad. He's literally thinking of himself, and he wants to be Princeps. Like Lucius, he wants to be in a position of command and power, and just by doing what's right isn't going to get him there. So he manages to distract. I think Cassar goes to leave, and he shoots him, doesn't he? He kills him, which I couldn't believe that was how Cassar was killed.
I really thought that Jonah was gonna help him out. I thought it was gonna be one of those bits where, he was torn, he wasn't sure, but ultimately ended up on the side of good. But they threw me for a flip when it was like, nope, Jonah takes him out, and I was like, what? What happened there?
I know. I generally thought he was gonna. I was expecting some point later that the Titan would come under Cassar's control.
Yeah.
And that would have been how something, I don't know. I thought that was going to be someone's way off the planet, or someone's savior was going to be through him.
Yeah.
And
I think what's interesting is it kind of signposts that maybe at this point we've read all of the good bits, the bits where the good guys get away, and that maybe this is the moment where it starts turning bad, and it might not be the happy ending we're all hoping for.
No, definitely. And then before we go into part 3, the last part, is back on the Vengeful Spirit, and Horus is pissed off because Angron was not supposed to land on the planet. They were going to bomb it from above, and move on to the next phase of their plan, Istavan 5.
Yeah, Horus needs to move quickly. That's his plan. With only 4 at this point, 4 confirmed legions.
Yeah,
he needs to move quickly before news of his betrayal gets out.
Yeah, and that's what they're all saying. We don't have time for this. And Abaddon says, no, you're right. Bomb Angron as well for disobeying your order.
Yeah,
and let's move on. But for whatever reason, Horus sort of says, no, we'll do this. We'll engage. It'll be all the sweeter for getting down there and getting to the traitors in his eyes, the loyalists, and for whatever reason, I think his own ego says, yeah, we're gonna go down swiftly and finish this off.
Yeah, underestimating the guys that were already down there.
Yeah. And then that brings us into part 3, the final part, Brothers.
Well, aptly named.
Yeah. And this is actually quite short. It's only 90 pages compared to the rest of it. A lot happens at quite a rapid pace, just to really... we've been building up for 3 books now to this point, to get... the sort of big face-offs between people and the final encounters. So this starts 3 days into battle. So for what Horus thought was going to be a quick and swift, let's land and get this done, it's dragged on for 3 days. And we start with the now reformed Lunar Wolves meeting with Tarvitz and his Emperor's children inside the battlements. And they've been essentially held up, fighting off wave after wave of World Eaters and managing somehow to hold Angron back.
Yeah.
And I think we've sort of come to them as they've just managed to sort of lure a massive wave of World Eaters in to what they thought was going to be a weakened point, and then they managed to cut them down from above and the sides and trap them, and that's sort of where we join them. Recovering from that battle, but at the same time, you have Emperor's children coming along, and Lucius goes out into the battle and sees Chaplain Charmosian riding a Land Raider, and essentially walks up to this Land Raider and challenges him to a duel on top of the tank. And they have quite an epic little fight on there, with Lucius with his sword and
Charmosian with the Crozius.
Crozius is what they carry, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Crozius. Yeah.
And again, he's got the death music playing, and he sees Charmosian's moves as they're coming, and he's able to get the better of him.
As I said, despite everything I know, there was a part of me, like, I know the way it's going, but there's part of me that was rooting for Lucius, and wanting him to stay on the side of good.
Well, and here you sort of think, well, he is, isn't he?
Yeah.
For all we know at the minute, he's still doing the right thing. And he manages to chop this guy's arms off and then cut his head off.
Yeah, he takes the skull-faced helmet and the chaplain's skull-faced helmet, and we're later to find out why. But obviously he has that. I mean, there's I don't know whether this happens before, but obviously when the other defenders they're obviously defending against the World Eaters, and Angron's actually there, and it's at that point that Captain Erlin actually tells Tarvitz to flee. He says, you've got to run, because this is Angron, this is my Primarch. I know we're in a world of bother here, and almost sacrifices himself and his troops to say to Tarvitz, you've got to get away from this now.
Yeah, go warn the rest if you can. Yeah, sorry, that happened. That was the last thing I think that happens in part 2, and you just see Angron come out, and he just doesn't care. He absolutely just rips into his own troops, really.
Yeah.
And jumping ahead, obviously we're going to get to Flight of Eisenstein, and we see the Death Guard's sort of path, and we'll get to Fulgrim, and we'll see Fulgrim. You're a bit further ahead of me. Do we get this same point of view from Angron later on?
So
Is there
not. I believe it does come in the books. It does come in the books. What the next bit you hear about Angron is actually in the, as I said, I think it's in book 8 or 9, which is like a collection of short stories.
Is it that Tales of Heresy?
That's the one. Yeah, it's
that'll be
Tales of
book.
Heresy.
That'll be book 10. That's my
Book
next
10.
book.
That one there is. So I really enjoyed that book, not because like it's a collection of shorter stories. So again, it's you've at the moment you've had like 9 really intense books, and this breaks it up a little bit with a few shorter ones. I know we mentioned it on the last podcast, depending on when this comes out. That one also includes like the story that Tommy mentioned, the Last Church on Earth.
Last Church. Okay.
And there's one in there on Abaddon, and not on Abaddon, and Angron.
Right.
And you get to understand him a little bit more, but it's teased. But you also get a bit of an introduction, or you learn more about Khan, who is obviously the Angron loyal, like captain or second in command of the World Eaters. So it's a really nice collection of stories. Definitely one to look forward to, because it's quite a quick book, and it's nice and snackable after the heavy meals of the first 9.
Okay, I am looking forward to that. That's next on my list. But we jump again. I think I've said that constantly. We jump again. So we do go back to Lucius, and he's got the helmet, and he's inside, and he has a bit of an exchange with Tarvitz, and he says to Lucius, "You're going to go and guard. I think it's the east side.
Yeah.
You're going to go with your men, and that's where you're going to defend." And he's still bitter because he thinks, "Who has put you in charge? You weren't even here, and now you've rocked up. I'm not one of Fulgrim's chosen, and now you're in charge." And he don't like that, and he goes and uses the helmet in secret to contact Eidolon, to make a deal with him.
Let me come back into the Legion. I want to be with you guys.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And it's
like, I can give you Tarvitz, he says, doesn't he? I can give you the palace. I can give you Tarvitz.
And so Eidolon's like, well, clearly, we've overlooked him. He's got the right stuff for the Emperor's children. Let's get him back on board. Yeah.
We may have made a mistake here. And then that message gets back to Horus, and he finds out that some good news, but he also finds out that Cruz helped Cinderman and Keeler escape, which he's not happy about that. But he's still focusing on what's going on.
Yeah, there's not much he can do about that at this point.
No. So he sends Abaddon and Aximand to land on the planet. And because I think he finds out that Lokin and Torgadon are still alive as well. So he sends them down.
Yeah, he finds out they're still alive. He commits the Sons of Horus to the main battle with the other traitors, as it were, but sends Ezekiel and Aximand down specifically to confront the other half of the Mournival, or what it's now former Mournival brothers, Lokin and Torgadon. And you're like, okay, this is where things are now going to come together. It's all going to come to a head here. This is what's meant to happen. It's like, as I said, it's the full circle, and the trilogy plays itself out. Yeah.
And then more good news or bad news for Horus, because Fulgrim returns and tells him that Ferrus Manus has refused to join them.
He wasn't happy about that. Yeah.
No. And it's quite strange, because he's like really angry with Fulgrim, but turns it around quite quickly, and he says, right, you're going to go to Istavan 5, and you're going to set up. Essentially, you're going to be the spring for my trap.
Yeah.
You go. I don't want you here. You go and get that done.
Yeah, because to begin with, Fulgrim's a bit angry about it, isn't he? He's like, why am I being sent away? What's this about? But that, I think, actually comes up in Fulgrim, so I won't spend too much time on that.
The only thing that is mentioned here, which doesn't make too much sense if you haven't read Fulgrim, is Horus is ever so slightly taken aback by Fulgrim's appearance.
Yes.
Because his hair is really pulled back and bleached another colour, and he's coming wearing a lot of makeup and extravagant, and even seeing like faint tattoos on his face.
Yeah, he's becoming quite it's a little bit hipster, as I said, that all comes, that's revealed why when we get to Fulgrim, but all it does right now is it kind of hints at, in the same way that there's something amiss in the Sons of Horus, or that the Horus has been courted by the ruinous powers. Maybe he's not the only one. Maybe there's also something else going on here.
Yeah, and I like that. Although we're only on book 3, you don't know it. The first time I read through, it didn't really mean too much to me. But like you said, it's the breadcrumbs. They're sowing the seeds that this isn't just an internal Sons of Horus or Lunar Wolves thing that's happening. It is Legion wide.
It's the ruinous powers, the Chaos Gods. They play their great game, and they're not just hedging their bets on one. They're playing with all of them.
Yeah, definitely. They're really more involved. We don't know quite the extent yet, and nobody does. Even everyone thinks that they're the one that's chosen until I'm assuming a lot later on.
The illusion of control, right? They all think that they're in control of this, that they're the ones in charge, and they really aren't.
Yeah. So back on Istvan 3, Loken finds out that his old brothers have landed, and he says to Torgadon, right, we're going to go, we're going to finish this. And like we said, Vipus, he says, I'm coming with you then. I know I'm going to die. I'm going to die fighting next to my friend. And Loken says, sorry, this is, you don't understand, but this is Mourneville business.
Yeah.
It needs to be just us. And says, you're going to stay here with Tarvitz and defend. And your job is to kill as many traitors as you can and slow them down for the Emperor to get here with backup.
Yeah, it's quite like a poignant moment. Because you really feel for Vipus, and you also feel for Loken as well, because I think if he had it one way or another, he'd probably want to have Vipus with him, but he also knows that as I said, it's like this. Even though it's a brotherhood that's been struck asunder by what's happening, he also knows that he's still got to respect that group.
Yeah.
So it can only be those 4.
Yeah.
So it's quite poignant.
So they make their way out and march through the city to go and find their quarry. But on the other side of the defences, the Vadon, the apothecary, who was the apothecary that Loken trusted the Amaphane to earlier on.
Yeah.
He's in the battle, and he's treating some wounded soldiers, and then sort of turns around and sees Eidolon standing there with his men, and then he gets a hammer through the head.
Yeah,
essentially.
Eidolon's attack is like it's brutal, really.
Yeah.
It's like swift and devastating, and just crushes through, and they just massacre the wounded loyalists. And effectively, pierce that part of the palace.
Yeah.
In a way that which shouldn't have happened had Lucius.
Had Lucius been where he should have been.
Indeed.
Yeah, because the word gets back to Tarvitz, and they say we've been breached. It's from Lucius's sector. So Tarvitz said, "Well, I'm going to go find out what happened." And he comes across, as he's going down the tunnels, he comes across a room full of dead Emperor's children.
Yeah.
And doesn't quite realise, and then he sort of gets a bit further and finds Eidolon and his men, who are planning their next phase of the attack, ready to go. And as he's sitting there waiting to sort of spring a trap, I think he calls in his men and says, "You need to come down here and back me up." And he turns around and Lucius is standing there, carving scars into his face.
Yeah, he finds him amongst the corpses, and is like, he obviously discovers the betrayal, and he's like, and obviously at this point, all of Lucius's pent up resentment, because it's not really anger. He's too calm for anger. His resentment kind of comes out, and the two of them get into it.
Yeah, they really do. And he even says to him, it's not personal. It's ambition, and me being your friend it doesn't work for me anymore. And Tarvitz says, after all the battles we've been through, all the years we've been together, and this is how you want it to be.
Yeah.
And Lucius says, don't try and pretend. Don't try and use our friendship to save you. This isn't about that. And they really do get into it. And I think Lucius was probably a bit more surprised that he didn't just kill Tarvitz so quickly.
Yeah.
Tarvitz managed to fight on for a while. But luckily, Tarvitz did get that message out for backup in time, because he's able to push Lucius away and shout, "Shoot him!" And then the men who'd come to back him up start shooting at Lucius, but Lucius manages to escape.
Yeah, as they're fighting, like Tarvitz remembers what Loken had to do to beat him in the practice cages.
Yeah,
and it was like, actually, like, Lucius is, he's a swordsman. He's this great fencer. He can a sword in his hand is like liquid to him. He can do it.
Yeah,
and he realizes that he's got to go Loken's route and just punch him in the face.
yeah, that's pretty much what he does to get him off.
Yeah.
And then luckily for him, the backup come, but Lucius manages to get out of there.
He does. He escapes to live another day.
Which I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next with him.
I as said, I've not come across it yet, but me being me and Googling these things, there's a lot coming up in Lucius's future. So I am looking forward to finding out how that plays out.
Right, so and then we skim across to Loken and Torgadon, and they're fighting their way towards the Parliament building where they know
that's it.
Abaddon and Aximand are.
Yeah.
And they come across Khan, Captain Khan.
Yeah, Khan.
And they have a bit of an exchange, and in that exchange, Loken is sort of looking into his eyes and seeing like humanity is leaving Khan, and as he's speaking, it's just like becoming more, not warped, but like you say, like I said, the humanity is leaving him, and he's just, the hate is taken over him, the anger.
Yeah.
And he says that he's going to kill him. He says, "I am the eightfolded path," which I thought was key.
Yep.
To say that he's clearly he's accepted chaos, hasn't he? He's accepted Khorne.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether he knows it yet. Like, I think he knows. Like, he's blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. He is like an embodiment of that, and like Khan as a character is exactly that. He that's what he's about. If anything, he's the closest outside of Angron to that embodiment of a Khorne berserker. So it's interesting, and like Khan, and when you get to the Tales of the Heresy, you see how good a character Khan actually is. And you realise, as I said, those breadcrumbs, when you put it together in the context, you see how far he's fallen to just be this berserker without any feeling, knowing where he's come from. So yeah, that, like, you can see that like Loken and Torgadon, they're like, okay, we're going to have our hands full here with Khan if we're not careful.
But they actually have quite a battle, because I think Loken gets quite wounded here. But then we have a bit of a speed ending here, where Logan sees lights coming and holds him out, and then he's swept away, impaled on the front of a Land Raider.
That's it. A tank
Which I
out
thought
of
was
nowhere.
yeah, well, I thought it was quite a comical. Not in. Well, I thought a comical ending for Khan, but now
Well,
knowing what I know, that's not quite his end, is it?
Yeah, at this point, we assume he's dead. Like that, as
Yeah.
far as you're aware. And even when I was reading it the first time, I was like, maybe there are two Khans. There aren't.
Yeah, yeah,
But at this point, you think, okay, that's the end of him.
yeah.
It's interesting, but yeah, as you said, a speed ending, and then
Yeah.
then
That brings us on to our last chapter, chapter 17.
the final moments. This is
Yeah.
it.
This is big stuff now.
Mm.
This is what really for Lokin and Tarvitz is involvement in the books. This is their arc, isn't it? This is what we've been building up to.
Absolutely. I was going to say that both of them, like they're backed into a corner. They're on a world that's effectively finished. They're insurmountable odds against them. All they can hope to do is kind of take as much time out of the traitors' cause as possible, and die with the honor that they crave. And that's kind of they've almost settled with that as their outcome. It's just it's not. They know it's the end. It's just what that end looks like.
Yeah. And they march their way into the Parliament, where they find the other half of what used to be the Mourneville and their brothers, Aximand and Abaddon.
Yeah.
And they sort of square off now. So you have Loken and Abaddon square off on one side, and Aximand and Torgadon on the other. And and it's sort of two different stories, because Loken is still saying it's not too late.
Yeah.
Like you can come back from this. You must have seen what's happened out there. The War Master Horus is wrong. He's traitor, and you could still do the right thing and help me. And Abaddon is absolutely like, no, the War Master's doing the right thing. The Emperor's ditched us. He doesn't care. We're going to right all the wrongs, and you just need to embrace it. But I think where Loken would have taken Abaddon and forgave him, Abaddon was already decided he's here to kill Loken.
And you kind of know it as well, because if I remember correctly, Abaddon's in his Justaeran Terminator armor, so he's he's fully kitted up. He's not mucking around, and he's up against Loken, who would have just been in his like Mark II power armor at the time, or whatever it was, like the old pre-heresy power armor, and he's already been like fighting for
days.
Coming on to weeks at this point. Like he's battle damaged. He's just had a kick in from Khan, and now he's got to come up against the first captain of the Sons of Horus, fresh as a daisy, loaded up in his Justaeran Terminator armor. It's not looking good.
No, but then on the flip side, we have little Horus and Torgadon squaring up, and their roles are almost reversed, because Axeman's saying, look, Horus said we had to come kill Loken. He didn't say anything about you.
Yeah.
Just don't do anything, and you can rejoin us, and you can come back. And Torgadon, he's decided, no, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Because you've destroyed what we had, and you've made the wrong choice. And he says, I made my choice at the lodge, and I stick to it. And then they square up, and Axeman says, well, it's like the sparring cages, just like the old days. And Torgadon says, no, it's nothing like that. And then they go at it, while Abaddon is definitely getting the better of Loken.
I mean, Axeman definitely he doesn't want to do it. Like, he knows he might have to do it, but he doesn't want to do it. He wants to, if anything, he's doing what he's told. He's kind of following Abaddon a little bit, and if anything, he just wants the old days back. He's like, he doesn't want to have to do this, because he still likes Torgadon, and it's just, as I said, it's one of those. As I spoke about it earlier, it's another one of those moments where you look at it and you just realise how tragic this tale is. These moments are like intertwined, and you feel for Examond, because he's not, I think this kind of all spiraled out of control for him. And he's in a position that he's not entirely sure he wants to be in, but he can't go back.
And
whereas, as you said,
oh yeah, I was going to say, out of the four, not that he's not a good character, but he's got the least character, because you've got Abaddon, who's bold and brash and angry, Torgadon, who's got the sense of humour but can get things done, Loken, who's sensible and thinks things out and obviously has seen what's happening, and Axelman's just been the other one who's always there. He's Abaddon's right hand man.
He's like Abaddon's little brother. He's like a bit of a tag along. Like, he's even though he isn't starting, he's probably the same height. He's this massive warrior. He feels like he's written as like the the little brother that tags along. Yeah,
he's definitely there to make up the numbers.
They needed a 4, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then we really flip over very briefly to Tarvitz and Vipers fighting against the Emperor's children. And Tarvitz is going to find Elidon, and then he sees up that the D's arrays heading towards them in the distance.
Yeah, these big stomping footprints.
Yeah, and as that's happening, the Parliament building's getting basically an earthquake happening around it as it's getting closer, and the building collapses and partly collapses, and Abaddon's temporarily buried.
Yeah.
And as that happens, Loken looks and sees up on a high-rise platform that Torgadon's down on his knees, and it says that his limbs are a mess, and he's just coming to the end, and Axelman standing above him, and Loken hears very clearly Axelman say, "I'm sorry," and then beheads Torgadon, which again come out of nowhere for me. I wasn't expecting that at all, considering how we've just spoke about the two of them as well. I think,
as I said, there's always that moment, like with all of these characters, especially towards the end of it. You're hoping some way there's a good ending for like Togadon, and maybe Axelman, maybe something happens, but you also know with the weight of all of the other books that's coming that this is not going to happen, and you're like, as you said, when it happens, you're like,
he was one of the characters that you wanted to see more of. I don't know if you watch South Park at all.
I do,
And have you seen the Game of Thrones episode where Randy's working in the shopping centre, and it's sort of taken on a Game of Thrones thing where they're acting like they're the Black Watch, but they're just security guards. And then it's when like the security leader gets killed, and he goes, "You can't die. Everybody liked you." And that's just that's what I thought when Torgadon got killed. I was like, that's not fair.
It didn't. As I said, it was when it happened, and you like. I remember, like as I said, listening to it and thinking, like I didn't want it to happen. I kind of knew it was going to happen. I was still surprised when it did happen, and then it kind of hits that level of finality that you realise that Horus is playing for keeps. There's a big difference between Axelman and Abaddon, but Axelman has, he's gone down that path too far now. And put a pin in it though, because there's an interesting part with Abaddon and Axelman right towards the end.
Yeah, it's so after that, Loken screams out, and I think that's it now for him. He knows this is it now. I've got to get on with it, and he goes for his final fight with Abaddon, and in true old-fashioned bad guy style, Abaddon manages to get Loken down on his back. After a fight, he's on his back. Him and Axelman are standing there, and they're gloating, and they're getting ready really slowly. And then he takes the sword off of Axelman, which killed Torgadon. He said, "This killed Torgadon. It might as well kill you." And as he goes for the killing blow, the Titan steps on the building.
Oh, yeah,
and they're all absolutely buried under the rubble. And bad guy talking too much, essentially put an end to what was going to be Loken's final moments there.
Yeah.
And then I think I think it's a bit later now that Abaddon dug himself out of the rubble and he drags Axelmund out, who's completely wounded. And then going back to what you were saying, they both think that Loken's dead.
Yeah, so they think Loken's dead, and I think there's a moment where, I think I can't remember if it's whether they're back on the vengeful spirit, but there's a moment where Abaddon sort of says, like, I think it's internal monologue, where he's kind of noting to keep an eye on Axelmund, because he's like, you know, he should have. Why is he saying sorry? He should have, you know, like just done it. Like there's, and he notes the sorrow for like the loss of Torgadon, and like he's like, I've got to keep an eye on him.
Yeah, which you think that maybe it's strange, because obviously there's definitely like the hatred between Abaddon and Loken was there, and probably just based on the simple fact that Torgadon sided with Loken was enough for Abaddon to cut him off. You didn't really see too much one-on-one with those two. There was no their head-to-head wasn't there. It was just you're either with me or against me. And the fact that, I mean, I don't know how long the three of them were on the Mourneville before Loken came in.
Yeah.
Because obviously their brotherhood goes back further, and for him you could understand him not caring about Loken because it's been less time, but to feel exactly the same for someone who's been brothers with for longer.
Yeah.
And then you could understand that Axelmund, well, he didn't want to kill Torgadon. So of course he feels bad because he's still got that humanity left, because I don't think he's accepted chaos yet.
No,
as much as everybody else.
Yeah, he's well, again, it's that thing. It's there's some of them, like you know, Abaddon is, you know, whether or not he knows it, he's open to it. Like he's following Horus, but like, you know, the ruinous powers, the gods of chaos, they can worm their way into him quite easily. Whereas with Axelmund, he's following orders, but he's kind of found himself in a situation that he never planned to be in. So he's not even thinking about, you know, ruinous powers or whether Horus is right or not. He's following orders and has, you know, just found his way into this situation. But
yeah, and then the last bit now really is everyone's evacuated. All of the traitors are evacuated. The battle's done.
The loyalists are all but defeated, so they all return to the fleet.
And Horus is sorting out like the final plans, probably setting up the rest of the series. And he says, right, what we're going to do is we're going to just do what we should have done in the first place. We stayed here too long. We're going to bombard this planet, and we're going to go and move on to Istavan 5. And then sort of the final sort of plans, he says, Fulgrim's already built a fortress on Istavan 5. He's waiting for us.
Yeah.
Ready to spring the trap. We've got 7 legions on their way to fight us, so we need to be prepared. And he said that we don't get any explanation, but he says they're coming into a trap. They will lose it. We won't lose. And once this is done, we'll turn and face and head for Terra.
Yeah.
Sanguinius is too far away, and the World Eaters have told me that the Ultramarines are going to muster Kalfik, I think it is.
Just Kalf.
Kalf. And by the time they realise what's happened, it'll be too late. And that is Horus. The last we get from Horus, he says, right, fire. And Loken isn't dead. He's laying in the rubble, pulls himself out, and he looks up and he sees, I think it says the last thing he sees is fire explode into the sky, and and then he feels nothing else after that.
Sees the bombs falling towards him, and
and that's it. And then we have Tarvitz and Vipus in the battlements with the few survivors, and they watch the explosions from there, and that's it. And that's how it ends. So we don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know, because I generally don't know if any of the people on Istavan 3 survive this.
Yeah, so, I mean, Okay, just so now,
Spoilers.
I mean, this is spoilers already. Like, if you
Yeah.
didn't know what's happening, but spoiler alert anyway. So Loken does pop up in a few later books, but they're in
Okay.
like short stories, and they are looking back to this point.
Right.
And then there is also a theory that at some point, is it a theory or does it happen? I can't remember. I remember googling it, but someone comes back to Isfan 3 and they find Loken, but he's mad. Like
Right.
he's just totally lost the plot. And I can't remember if he ends up in the Grey Knights or not. I don't think it's the Grey Knights because he's got no latent psychic ability. But I think it's Garrow comes back for him.
Right.
And then, but I'd have to research into it. So you do hear from Loken again.
Okay.
Ancient Rylanor.
He's still there, isn't he?
You hear from him again because he does something really, like he starts transmitting a beacon, and some of the traitor Emperor's children, this is far in the future, come back and find him on Isfan 3, and he explains everything that's happened, and actually these traitor Emperor's children end up killing themselves rather than continuing to be traitors
wow.
because of this. Yeah, it's an amazing little bit of narrative. But
is that something we're going to get to in our Heresy series?
I think it might be, but
Okay.
you might not be able to quote me on that. It might be an additional. It might be outside of the Heresy because I think it's relatively close to the timeline we're at now. But
even if it's not something we do in this series,
yeah,
we'll get to it eventually because I want to see that.
It is somewhere, but yeah. So there, as you said, there's some characters in here that you don't want to let go of because they're so, they're so good. But after this, obviously, we go with one of the other. So it's what's interesting is for the first 3 books, we've really been with Loken, and then from next book where we get to the Eisenstein, we've been introduced to Garrow at this point. Garrow is someone that's pivotal in the rest of the Imperium, the rest of the narrative, the rest of the heresy, and so we start following him in the Eisenstein. So that will obviously be the next review, which is, as I said, it's a good one, and it's less bouncing around because it's a bit more linear. We go from from the Isfan system to Terra, effectively, or at least en route. Get introduced to a few interesting characters like our good friend Typhus.
Yes, another good guy's name.
Yes, indeed. But it's it as I said, it sets us up nicely. It's a great way, like, to end this trilogy. If you were only ever going to read 3 books of the Heresy, just reading these 3 is a good, it's a good introduction to the universe. It's a good introduction to these key characters that go on to do bigger and better things, and it's just interesting to see how, as I said, how tragic and how much fate plays a part in it, and that just keeps compounding itself the more books you get for it.
Yeah, definitely. So, final thought then, to rate because these 3 books, although they're 3 books, it's one story really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to rate it, where do you rate this as a story? Not necessarily in the series, but I would give it a 10 out of 10. I think because it's great.
Yeah, it is. It's a modern classic. There's a reason why these books, and particularly the early books, made their way onto like the New York Times bestseller list and best reviewed list, because they are really, really well put together. They're really detailed. They're built off an incredible amount of lore that Games Workshop have put together, and they're written by really talented writers. So it is not, it's at this point at least, it's not just bolter porn. It's not it's not throwaway trashy stuff. It's good solid storytelling, and it is worth the time, even if you weren't into 40k or Warhammer or anything like that. It's still a good book, and it's still a good story, and the ups and downs of the key characters still, they have their poignant moments. It is a tragedy in the it's a tragic tale of fate and what happens when things are put together. So it's absolutely a great story.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and bit like being new to Warhammer, I wasn't expecting this at all. Like, I mean, like I've mentioned many times already, I read the Eisenhorn books, which I thought were fantastic.
Yeah.
Then I read the first Space Wolves trilogy, which I really liked most of it. I really liked it, and then 15 Hours as well. And then I stepped into the Heresy from there, and I mean everything so far I've really really enjoyed. And then I wasn't sure what I was expecting. As I said in the first video, I was expecting it to be sort of following Horus on one long story like that. But to get what we've got out of it is absolutely fantastic. And just the depth of the universe that's explored in quite short time, really. I mean, yeah, I didn't know what to expect, and I'm really glad that I picked these books up because they've been absolutely fantastic. I'm really looking forward to doing Flight of the Eisenstein next. And then beyond.
That's it. I have got to pick up the pace of my reading because before we know it, we're going to catch up with where we're at.
Well,
and then we're going to have to start reading for these, but that's fine. We'll get there.
Yeah. So we'll wrap it up for this episode because I think we've gone on for quite some time. So if you haven't already, give us a like and a subscribe and a share on YouTube, and then check out the other videos we've got, hobby tips and the podcast and other stuff that we're working on. And hopefully it could be out by now. It depends when I decide to publish this video because I'm trying to keep up at the minute. So from me, that's goodbye.
From me, it's goodbye. As John said, comment away. Please tell us how you thought about it as well. I'm more than happy to have the debate with people that are interested in this as well. So yeah, please do let us know what you think as well.
Awesome. See you later.
Bye, guys.